The boy possesses an immortal body. Even if his heart is pierced, he recovers within seconds. Initially thought to be a divine gift, after living for centuries and witnessing the death of those around him, he realized that this immortality was actually a cruel curse. Originally just a boy from the slums, he was one day chosen by Oryu to become one of the 4 dragon warriors serving King Hiryu. Hakuryu had a dragon hand that could tear through weapons. Seiryu possessed dragon eyes that could mesmerize humans, and Ryokuryu inherited powerful dragon legs. Oryu's ability, however, seemed trivial, merely healing quickly from injuries without a clear explanation from the dragon god of its nature. Thus, he was often the one protected in battle. Under King Hiryu's leadership, they established a powerful nation. Although Oryu was the weakest among the brothers, he was not ostracized. Even though they were not related by blood, their shared inheritance of the dragon god's powers bonded them like true brothers, with King Hiryu as their eldest. The longer Oryu stayed with them, the more he felt like the least useful warrior, possessing nothing but a strong body. King Hiryu realized a terrible truth, embraced Oryu tightly, and entrusted him with his most precious treasure, though Oryu did not understand why the king did so. Just then, their nation faced another invasion. King Hiryu sent out the other 3 dragon warriors, keeping Oryu by his side. With just the 3 warriors, they could match an army. Knowing the power of the dragons was beyond human reach, the enemy resorted to a war of attrition. Despite their dragon powers, they were still human. During a retreat led by Oryu and Seiryu, Oryu was ambushed by the enemy. As he thought he would die there, his massive wound suddenly healed. It was the first time Oryu realized how strong his healing power was. Years passed, and the other dragon warriors began to age. King Hiryu suddenly fell ill, and only Oryu remained unchanged by time. Watching his brothers age, Oryu grew terrified of his own body. King Hiryu seemed to perceive something. Oryu confessed to the king. His body was incredibly strong, immune to fatigue and illness. Although he felt pain from injuries, they healed quickly, completely. "What's the difference between me and an immortal monster?" he repeatedly asked the king about the nature of his dragon power. King Hiryu could only hold him gently, unable to relieve Oryu of his torment. A few days later, King Hiryu died. The dragon warriors wept bitterly by his body. After King Hiryu's death, the other 3 dragon warriors were sent back to battle. People began to covet the power of the dragons for themselves. They captured Seiryu as a prisoner. Fortunately, Hakuryu and Ryokuryu rescued him in time. Since then, Seiryu blinded himself and decided to no longer use the power of the dragon. The dragon warriors realized humans' desire for their power and unanimously decided to leave the kingdom and live in seclusion. However, Oryu chose to stay in the palace. He felt obligated to protect the nation that King Hiryu had established and planned to leave only once everything was stable. Although they were about to part ways, they were brothers with the blood of dragons. Despite being separated by great distances, they would always respond to each other. The bond of the dragon warriors would never fade. After saying their goodbyes, the 3 warriors each embarked on their own journeys. Oryu served as a priest within the kingdom. Years passed. Hakuryu and Seiryu found solace in the mountains, while Ryokuryu wandered. 20 years quickly passed. Oryu could still sense his brothers' locations through their bloodline, but their presences were weakening. Over these 2 decades, the kingdom faced conflicts but did not lose a single soldier because Oryu, unwilling to sacrifice King Hiryu's people, chose to fight alone on the battlefield. Using his immortal body, he wore down the enemy forces, his incredible vitality causing countless soldiers to tremble. However, at this time, the lifespans of his 3 brothers reached their ends. Feeling their lives fading, Oryu was in immense pain. He did not avoid meeting his brothers because he did not care, but because he feared facing them as they aged. Despite his dedicated service to the nation, Oryu faced ostracism years later because he alone did not age. After appointing a successor as priest, he left the palace and entrusted the successor with King Hiryu's crest. However, shortly after leaving, the crest mysteriously reappeared on him. Perhaps it was King Hiryu's will, or a sign that he still had a mission with the crest. Oryu then set off alone on his journey. During his travels, Oryu often sensed the presence of the other dragon warriors. The bloodline of the dragons did not disappear, but continued to be passed down generation to generation. Yet, these were not the brothers he knew. While secretly observing the new Hakuryu, Oryu was attacked by people from another tribe. If not for his immortality, he might have died there. He remembered Hakuryu's promise that no matter how many years passed, he would wait for him. However, Oryu dared not face his aging brother, and they never saw each other one last time. Regret now could not change anything. Oryu continued his journey, having lived for countless years. Though he could not die, he still felt human emotions. Yet, he could not starve himself to death, even if he tried. Until one day, A girl found him and took him home. The girl, named Kaya, explained the situation to Zeno when he woke up and shared her limited food with him. However, Zeno did not want to eat because he longed for death. Kaya did not understand his desire, as she herself was suffering from a contagious disease and could die at any time. She had chosen to live alone away from the village to avoid infecting others. Kaya had not intended to hide this from Zeno. She planned to have him leave after eating. After learning about Kaya's situation, Zeno told her his name, which he hadn't heard anyone use in years since he had parted ways with his brothers. He had almost forgotten his own name. Kaya suggested that if he ever felt close to forgetting his name, he should just call it out to himself. Kaya wanted Zeno to leave soon, but he did not want to go. She had taken care of him, and now it was his turn to repay her kindness. Moreover, he could not catch her disease. So, they continued to live together. With Zeno's help, Kaya's life became easier. During the day, Zeno would work outside to earn food, and Kaya would prepare dinner for him. Occasionally, Zeno brought her flowers, and their harmonious, warm life eased much of his past pain. However, happiness did not last. Kaya's illness worsened. After making sure she was warm, Zeno heated stones and put them in a cloth bag for her to hold and keep warm. Seeing all that Zeno had done for her, Kaya wished he would leave and pursue his desires instead of spending his days with her, a sick person. At this moment, Zeno felt utterly hopeless. He wished to transfer his immortal power to Kaya and prayed repeatedly for the dragon god to reappear. If the god could grant him eternal life, surely he could extend Kaya's life as well. However, no matter how many times Zeno prayed, the dragon god did not respond, and Kaya's illness reached its final stage. In her last moments, Kaya made a promise to meet Zeno in the next life, but with his eternal life, how could he possibly enter the cycle of reincarnation? He could only watch as Kaya turned to bones. After burying Kaya near their home, Zeno resumed his journey, having lost all sense of time. Without friends or purpose, whenever he felt on the verge of a breakdown, only King Hiryu's crest could calm him. He realized then why King Hiryu had reacted the way he did upon learning of his power. The king had foreseen Zeno's fate and given him the crest for the dragon god's protection, and to give Zeno something to cling to. But with King Hiryu gone, why hadn't the dragon god taken back the power? Thinking this, Zeno suddenly realized that King Hiryu might resurrect, and he could reunite with the bloodline of his brothers. At that moment, Uryu finally found a purpose: to protect the nation that King Hiryu had established, waiting for his return. One day, a red star suddenly lit up, and it seemed all the dragon warriors sensed it. Uryu found the young Hakuryu, whose powers had not yet matured, so he did not recognize Uryu. They watched the distant red star together, and Uryu noticed a large claw mark on Hakuryu's back, signifying their shared burdens. When Hakuryu's people came looking for him, Uryu had to leave. Next, Uryu found Seiryu through their bond. For some reason, the young Seiryu wore a mask and was always playing alone. The last one he found was Ryokuryu. Even the gentle Uryu was outraged to see Ryokuryu, who once soared in the skies, now chained and locked in a dungeon. The rebirth of King Hiryu's soul could be for protecting the nation, creating a new one, or because of his attachment to the dragon warriors. Uryu could not know. That was something to be revealed in years to come, and all he could do was wait. In the palace, Princess Yona is carefully dressing up, because today is her 16th birthday, marking her coming of age. She is the reincarnation of King Hiryu. The king dotes on her immensely, and has arranged for the strongest general to be her guard. Hawk, who has grown up with Yona, likes to tease her. Although Yona would like to change her guard, no one can defeat Hawk in a contest. Growing up alongside them was another friend, Suwon, who is quite different from Hawk. As a royal descendant, he resembles a refined scholar and has always been gentle towards Yona. However, Yona could never imagine that the person she admired the most would eventually become her greatest enemy. Suwon has been accompanying Yona in the palace since they were children. Whenever Yona felt wronged, Suwon would comfort her. Yona fell for the gentle Suwon, but he seemed to only see her as a sister, and their relationship made no progress. The next day, when Yona went to have breakfast with Suwon, she was told he was competing with Hawk in archery, an area where Hawk excelled as a true warrior. Seeing Yona eager to try, Suwon invited her to go horseback riding. While riding, Yona asked Suwon about his romantic experiences, but he said he hadn't dated anyone. Yona playfully claimed she was already discussing marriage, and when Suwon asked with whom, she could only think of Hawk. Though it was clearly a joke, Suwon still wished her well. However, the king told Yona he planned to betroth her to Hawk, but she only wanted to be with Suwon. The king opposed this, and Yona didn't expect such an angry reaction from her father, who was strongly against Suwon for reasons unknown to her. Yona hid and cried alone. At that moment, an assassin approached her. In the chaos, Yona hid in a room. Suwon found her there and went to check outside, but the assassin had already disappeared. Suwon returned to comfort Yona, and with him by her side, she gradually calmed down. Suwon was eager to leave, but Yona confessed her feelings for him. Seeing the person she liked blush made Yona inexplicably happy. Even if she couldn't marry Suwon, it was enough for her that he noticed her a little. A few days later, Yona's coming-of-age ceremony finally arrived. Officials gathered at the palace to celebrate. Suwon gave Yona a beautiful hairpin and expressed his admiration for her long crimson hair, reminiscent of the dawn sky. As the two shared a tender moment, Hak suddenly appeared, having been sent by the king who was looking for Yona. Hak sensed something amiss in the palace, as if someone had infiltrated it. He instructed Suwon to protect Yona while he went to strengthen the palace's security. That evening, Yona decided to speak with her father again about Suwon, as her feelings for him were genuine. However, what she witnessed next left her utterly devastated. Suwon, the man she had admired, had killed her father. The Suwon she knew had changed. He believed Yona's father was too kind to be a king. Suwon's own father, a brave and skilled warrior, had not been chosen as king. Yet he harbored no resentment and was content to serve the country, even if only as a general. But it was this patriotic general who was killed by Yona's father, a secret known only to a few. The peace-loving king had committed such an act, prompting Suwon's revenge, to avenge his father and change the weak country, though he did not intend to harm Yona. That's why he chose to strike at night, unaware that Yona would be there. She had only come to persuade her father to approve their marriage. Upon hearing this, Suwon was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. Rebels who were part of the coup also arrived at the scene. They planned to kill Yona to prevent the truth from being revealed. In a panic, Yona knocked over a brazier and fled the room amidst the chaos. However, soldiers quickly surrounded her. Just in time, Hak, sensing something was wrong, arrived and swiftly dealt with the soldiers. This was the first time Hak saw Yona so terrified. He was commanded by the king to protect the princess and would never betray her, regardless of the circumstances. The soldiers commanded Hak to kneel, as Suwon was to be the next king. Upon learning that Suwon had killed Yona's father, Hak, unable to believe his close friend could murder the benevolent king, furiously confronted Suwon. Suwon was quickly injured under Hak's attack. The soldiers then took Yona hostage to subdue Hak. As they were about to kill them both, an arrow flew in, breaking the stalemate. Hak seized the opportunity to rescue Yona. The rescuer was one of the princess's attendants, who had donned Yona's clothes to distract the pursuers, while Hak and Yona escaped from the palace. After escaping the palace, Yona was in a state of shock. The people closest to her had left her overnight, and her loyal servants were killed while saving her. Yona didn't know where to go. On the day of her 16th birthday, she lost her family, her loved one, and her only home. Hak stayed by her side, hoping she would soon overcome her grief. 3 years ago, Hak and his grandfather visited the palace to see the king. The king liked Hak very much and wanted him to become the princess's guard. However, Hak found the palace too formal and preferred a freer life, so he declined the king's request. Nevertheless, because of their childhood bond, Yona sometimes relied heavily on Hak. Due to her status, nobles often proposed marriage to her, especially Kanjun from the Fire Tribe, who was persistent. Hak suggested Yona could announce her liking for Suwon to avoid trouble, but she found the idea too embarrassing since it was unrequited love. Frustrated by the complications, Hak planned to leave, which Yona did not understand and thought him suddenly indifferent. Later, she brought him lots of treats and apologized, hoping to remain good friends. When Kanjun harassed Yona again, even inappropriately touching her in the palace, Hak couldn't stand by and intervened, claiming they were betrothed since childhood. An angry Kanjun challenged Hak to a duel, but the king intervened, scaring Kanjun away with a blade. The king then reiterated his request for Hak to protect Yona, and Hak formally accepted the role, knowing the king was not a weak ruler. Now, with the king murdered, Hak was determined to protect Princess Yona. However, as they fled, Yona grew increasingly frail and despondent, with Suwon to blame for their plight. The only time Yona took independent action was to search for a lost hairpin, a gift from Suwon on her birthday, which nearly led to a snake attack. Hak arrived just in time to save her and retrieved the hairpin. Meanwhile, unable to locate Hak and Yona, Suwon ordered the pursuit halted as he had more pressing matters, ascending to the throne. After a long journey, Hak finally returned to his homeland, the Wind Tribe. With his grandfather's troops there, Suwon did not dare to openly start a civil war. The villagers crowded around when they saw Hak arrive with a woman, but Yona had already fainted from exhaustion, and his grandfather was not in the tribe because a summoning order had been issued for the leaders of the 5 tribes to go to the palace. At the palace, the 5 tribal chiefs gathered together. The king had suddenly died, and rumors circulated that Hak had killed his highness and then fled with the princess. Suwon asked them to keep this a secret, warning that if the news leaked, other nations would seize the opportunity to invade. The priority was to stabilize the domestic situation. Princess Yona, the primary heir to the throne, was now missing, leaving Suwon, who also had royal blood, as the only viable successor. He needed the approval of the 5 tribal chiefs to become king. The four major tribes had no objections, but Mundok, the chief of the Wind tribe, withheld his opinion since he had already passed the leadership to Hawk. To gain the Wind tribe's approval, Su-wan would have to speak with Hawk himself. Mundok stated that he would gladly bless Su-wan and Yona's marriage and accession to the throne, but now his grandson Hawk had mysteriously disappeared. He did not believe that Hawk would kidnap the princess. Su-wan clearly informed Mundok that the coronation ceremony would take place in 3 days. If Mundok did not show up, the Wind tribe would be regarded as rebellious and would face a joint attack from the four major tribes. Su-wan had already won over the other four major tribes. These tribal chiefs thought the previous king was weak and strongly supported Su-wan as the new king. After some rest, Yona finally woke up, and Hawk continued to keep her identity hidden. However, Su-wan soon took action against the Wind tribe, with the Fire tribe cutting off the tribe's only water supply. When Mundok returned and saw the princess and Hawk together, he realized Su-wan was the true mastermind behind the troubles. They had no way to respond effectively, as the water cutoff was just a warning from Su-wan. If Mundok did not attend the coronation, a siege by the four tribes would surely follow. Recognizing Su-wan as king would imply accepting the suspicion that Hawk killed the king. At night, Hawk met with his grandfather, returned the leadership to him, and asked him to acknowledge Su-wan as king to save the tribe. Hawk was willing to be branded a national criminal and wanted. Yona, hiding here, would be spared by Su-wan's mercy. After seeing a merchant caravan attacked by the Fire tribe, Yona realized it might be because of her and decided to leave with Hawk. Only then could the Wind tribe be completely free from conflict. However, Hawk was determined to prevent any further harm to Yona. Despite this, Yona decided to leave with Hawk. Hawk's grandfather specifically told her that she could return to the Wind tribe anytime, if she ever faced despair again. He also gave them crucial information: to seek the retired royal priest, who would guide Princess Yona on her path forward. For the first time, Yona stepped outside the palace. As a princess, she only knew Hiryu Castle. Lost in her thoughts, Hawk suddenly pushed her against a wall due to the sound of approaching footsteps, sensing danger. Indeed, it was the Fire tribe's soldiers who quickly surrounded them. However, Hawk was eager for battle, making the attacking soldiers seem like children with weapons. When a frontal attack failed, Kanjun ordered archers to shoot. Hawk easily knocked down the arrows, but the enemy was too numerous. While Hawk could easily retreat alone, protecting the princess distracted him. As Yona stumbled, the enemy aimed an arrow at her. To protect her, Hawk shielded her with his body. After securing Yona in a hidden spot, Hawk decided to confront all the enemies alone. However, the arrow that hit him was poisoned, which would immobilize a normal person immediately. But Hawk still managed to keep fighting. As his strength began to falter, Kanjun planned a sneak attack from behind. Yona, seeing this, was unsure how to help without risking capture by the enemy, which would endanger Hawk even more. Yet if she did nothing, Hawk would surely be killed. Yona's decision to leave the Wind tribe was not to live under Hawk's protection but to live freely. She could have hidden in the Wind tribe for the rest of her life if safety was her only concern. So she knocked a soldier off a cliff and glared angrily at Kanjun. She had already lost her family and could not lose Hawk too. Kanjun tried to persuade her, but Yona wouldn't believe his lies. Her fiery gaze put immense pressure on Kanjun. Though Hawk had eliminated most of the soldiers, his body was nearly spent. If not for Yona, he might have already fallen. He fought fiercely, but was eventually ambushed and thrown towards a cliff edge. Yona, in utter despair, thought she was about to lose Hawk too. She rushed towards him, but Kanjun grabbed her long hair. Resolute, Yona cut off her hair with a weapon, breaking her father's rule against her wielding arms. Although her swordsmanship was clumsy, her determination to face death was moving. Yona tried to pull Hawk up from the cliff edge, but she wasn't strong enough, and they both fell off the cliff. This shattered Kanjun's dreams of becoming king, and he might also face punishment from the new king. He handed Yona's hair to Su-wan and reported her death, following Su-wan's orders to report if they were found. However, Kanjun had acted on his own to capture them. Su-wan did not punish him, but sadly looked at Yona's red hair, as he still had his own mission to complete. Once, the three were best friends. In a casual conversation, Su-wan had envied Yona for having Hawk as a strong guard. Hawk had said if Su-wan married Yona and became king, he would serve as Su-wan's guard to ensure their safety. Now, as the newly crowned king, he had lost two close friends. Meanwhile, the unconscious Yona and Hawk were rescued by a boy named Yoon, a doctor. Hawk had held on to Yona as they fell, cushioning their fall with his body. Fortunately, Hawk's sturdy body withstood the impact. Unexpectedly for Yona, Yoon's guardian turned out to be the kingdom's priest. As the former priest Uryu, he never imagined that the priest he trained to protect the nation would be exiled and become reviled years later. Yona, living in the palace, was unaware of why the priest was driven out. Meanwhile, Hawk's fever persisted, and Yona could only pray that Yoon would save him. To ease the princess's worries, the priest invited Yona for a walk. During their stroll, Yona asked why the priest had settled there. He explained that it all happened naturally. That evening, Yona approached Yoon to earnestly thank him. Perhaps because she was accustomed to being treated with deference as a princess, she had always assumed that everyone's efforts on her behalf were expected. Now she realized she had been wrong. Expressing gratitude for help received is necessary. Yona also hoped Yoon would share more about the priest's situation. In the past, priests held untouchable authority, even over kings, since the original priest, Oryu, served King Hiryu. After King Hiryu's death, Oryu protected the nation for years and mentored new kings and priests. After Oryu left the country, the priest's power grew significantly, even to the point where a priest had overthrown a king. At the height of the kingdom's power, the king saw the influential priests as a threat to his rule and expelled the current priest from the palace. The priest then realized that only the royal city was prosperous, while the rest of the kingdom suffered from hunger and conflict. Despite his desire to save everyone, he was powerless and eventually developed mental illness. At night, Yona noticed that Hawk was missing and hurried outside to look for him. It turned out Hawk had gone to retrieve his weapon that he had dropped, knowing they could face battles any time. He was surprised to see how worried the princess was about him. Seeing Yona had cut her beloved long hair, Hawk realized he had failed to protect her. However, Yona now disliked her long hair because it had been praised by Su-won, whom she needed to let go of emotionally. Yet Hawk understood that Yona hadn't truly moved on, because she could part with her favorite hair, but not the hairpin Su-won had given her. Still harboring some attachment, the next day, Yona continued to seek advice from the priest, but found him crying on a cliff, having seen a vision involving Yona and the world. The priest foresaw that Yona would stir significant changes in the kingdom. While she could choose a quiet, ordinary life, her fiery blood would not allow it. The priest then conveyed a divine prophecy to Yona. When darkness descends upon the land, the blood of Hiryu will revive the dead. According to the ancient covenant, when the 4 dragons gather, the guardian artifacts will awaken, leading to the dawn of the red dragon. Though Yona did not understand the full meaning of these words, they would soon become reality. Rumors say that the red dragon god descended to guide humanity, but inadvertently caused disputes with them. King Hiryu was captured by humans and nearly executed when 4 dragons descended to the mortal realm. Unwilling to see Hiryu killed, the 4 dragons granted their blood to human warriors, giving them strength. These warriors became embodiments of the dragons, dedicated to protecting Hiryu's life. With the power of the dragon gods, the warriors led their tribes to protect Hiryu and quell internal strife. However, after Hiryu fell into a deep sleep, the mission of the 4 dragon warriors ended. Believing their power was too great for ordinary humans, the dragon warriors left the kingdom they helped establish. Their descendants formed the current kingdom's 5 tribes, which is the foundation myth of Yona's nation. However, the priest told Yona that these events were real, only becoming mythologized over time. If Yona wanted to protect everything dear to her, she needed to find the legendary 4 dragon warriors. Yona worried that the legendary dragons might not help due to these matters, yet all her encounters miraculously escaped danger. This was fate. If Yona could truly find the dragon warriors, it would be her destiny. Resolved, Yona decided to set out to find them. The priest asked them to take Yoon along since he was a walking encyclopedia who could assist them. The descendants of the dragon warriors had been changing their residences since ancient times, except for one who had always stayed in the same place. This was their first destination. Deep in distant mountains, a white-haired boy awaited the return of King Hiryu. The newborn baby was almost killed by his biological father because he inherited the new Hakuryu's power, which meant the old Hakuryu would lose his strength. Despite not having completed his mission to serve King Hiryu, the father was reluctant to lose the bloodline of Hakuryu. However, he was stopped by the tribal chief and subsequently isolated and monitored, never able to see his child again. The baby grew up to become the new Hakuryu, but the claw marks on his back left a permanent scar. Meanwhile, Yona and her companions, in their struggle to survive, embarked on a journey to find the 4 dragon warriors. Each time they entered a village for food, they narrowly avoided detection by soldiers of the Fire Tribe. During their travels, they heard that Su-won had officially become king. They continued their journey, dodging searches while heading towards their destination. After much thought, Yona decided to ask Hawk to teach her swordsmanship, as she did not want to always be a burden to him. However, Hawk questioned if Yona was truly ready to take another person's life, explaining that wielding a weapon means fighting and not allowing the opponent to stand up could be necessary. Yona, even if she couldn't kill, wanted to create opportunities to free Hawk when needed. Ultimately, Hawk compromised and agreed to teach Yona archery due to the urgency of their situation. They practiced while on the move, with Yona attempting to hunt animals to overcome her inner fear. Hawk even had Yona practice shooting arrows at him, treating him like an enemy, but her lack of killing intent meant she could not harm him. After traveling for several days, the group finally arrived at a dense, foggy forest where Yoon mysteriously disappeared. Soon, they were surrounded by a group of people led by an old man. Seeing Yona's red hair, the old man recalled the teachings of his ancestors and took Yona and her companions to their village for confirmation. Yoon had already been captured and brought here, which was the settlement of Hakuryu. The lineage of Hakuryu had been passed down here, and the villagers had protected them generation after generation. The original Hakuryu had served King Hiryu, who also had red hair, which was why they respected Yona. To confirm Yona's identity, they relied on the current Hakuryu, who was bound by the dragon's bond. That's why they brought them to the village. Upon seeing Yona for the first time, the blood of Hakuryu began to flow backwards, and the new Hakuryu fully awakened his dragon powers. Through the bond in his blood, he realized that Yona was the king he was destined to protect in this life. However, Yona stated that she was not the king of Hakuryu. She had come seeking the power to protect herself and her companions. Upon leaving, Hakuryu specifically instructed the villagers to protect their village well. Then, they embarked on their new journey. The 4 dragon warriors share a unique bond that allows them to sense each other's locations, with the sensation growing stronger as they draw nearer. Hakuryu sensed that Seiryu was the closest. However, soon after they set off, they were attacked by bandits. Yoon and Yona hid in advance. The bandits were no match for Hawk and Hakuryu. This was the first battle in thousands of years for the bloodline of Hakuryu, and the thrill of battle invigorated him, excited to fight for his king again. However, Hawk's skill in killing the enemies was no less impressive than Hakuryu's. Yona, hiding in a corner, attempted to fight under Yoon's guidance and hit a bandit who was sneaking up on them, but they were discovered by other bandits. Hawk and Hakuryu rushed over, and soon all the bandits were dealt with, but Hawk's wound reopened, causing him to faint. Yona couldn't move Hawk by herself, but fortunately, Hakuryu easily lifted Hawk. Hawk woke up later that night, and Hakuryu shared intelligence collected from his village. The Seiryu clan had once lived in secrecy within the Earth Tribe's territory, but one day, the entire tribe vanished. Without the dragon bond, Hakuryu wouldn't have been able to find Seiryu. After the rest, they searched the likely locations of Seiryu one by one, but couldn't find any trace. Seiryu's presence was elusive. Meanwhile, Yona continued her archery training relentlessly, unable to forgive her own weakness and desiring to become stronger to help her companions. After eliminating other villages from their search, they finally arrived at a stony mountain where Hakuryu could clearly sense Seiryu's presence. As soon as they entered, they were surrounded by hostile villagers, and Seiryu did not come out to meet Yona. The baby was considered a monster by the villagers immediately after birth, leading his mother to take her own life. The villagers put a mask on the baby's face because he was the next Seiryu, whose powerful dragon eyes could petrify people. Seiryu has never removed his mask since birth, always seeing darkness, relying only on his dragon eyes to see his surroundings. He was raised by the old Seiryu. As the new Seiryu's powers began to awaken, the old Seiryu's powers gradually faded. However, no one in the village wanted to be near them. After the new Seiryu sought out other children, hoping to make friends, the old Seiryu scolded him and mockingly told him that he could never make friends. But the new Seiryu did not understand why the villagers avoided him. There has always been a rumor in the village that anyone who looks into Seiryu's eyes will turn to stone. However, the dragon eyes do not petrify people. They cause paralysis, and depending on the power's intensity, they can even paralyze the heart. This is why the villagers are so fearful, viewing Seiryu's bloodline as a curse. Even if a Seiryu dies, the power will be reborn in a new baby, leaving everyone uncertain if their child might be the next Seiryu. Despite being the most powerful entity in the village, each Seiryu has the duty to protect the village. When bandits invaded, the old Seiryu still had to ensure the village's safety. However, as the new Seiryu's powers awakened more, the old Seiryu's powers weakened. Yet, dealing with a few bandits was still easy for him, as he was a strong swordsman by nature. The new Seiryu asked why he did not use the power of the dragon eyes against the bad people. The old Seiryu explained that the power of the dragon eyes was too terrifying to use, unless absolutely necessary, as using it would lead to a lifetime of being despised. With no friends or parents, he now saw the old Seiryu as his only support. Although the old Seiryu was strict with him, the new Seiryu understood it was all to protect him, and even taught him how to control the power of his eyes. But as time passed, the new Seiryu's powers awakened more, and the old Seiryu's body grew weaker, struggling even against bandits. While they managed to drive the bandits away, the old Seiryu completely lost his sight. It was unclear whether he felt pain or relief as he vented years of suppressed emotions. On their way back, the old Seiryu apologized to the new Seiryu, for he had completed his mission of passing on the lineage and then fell into an eternal slumber. The new Seiryu inherited all the cursed powers, making the villagers fear him even more. Seiryu confined himself to his house daily, using his dragon eyes to monitor the surroundings of the village. Soon, another group of soldiers coveting the dragon's power arrived in large numbers. With his current swordsmanship alone, he knew he couldn't defeat them all. To protect the village Seiryu was guarding, he decided to bear the pain of the curse alone. After the disaster, Seiryu village began to relocate. hiding deep within the stone mountains and showing great hostility towards outsiders. When Yona and her group arrived, they were immediately surrounded. Hakuryu asked the villagers to bring out his brother, but the villagers claimed there was no Seiryu there. Despite this, Hakuryu's senses were not mistaken, and it was unclear why they were hiding Seiryu's presence. Yona decided to stay overnight, trusting in Hakuryu's bond, believing there must be a reason Seiryu would not show himself. The group secretly went out to look for Seiryu. Soon, a squirrel distracted Yona, and she accidentally entered a hidden door, losing sight of Hawk and the others. Fortunately, a villager found Yona and tried to lead her away, but Yona felt something was wrong as they kept descending, which couldn't be the way out of the cave. Seiryu appeared just in time to scare away the villager, but Yona did not recognize the boy as Seiryu. When Seiryu brought Yona to Hakuryu, he recognized the boy as Seiryu. Seiryu's identity exposed, he ran away, thinking he would spend his life here and pass on the Seiryu power to the next generation. However, Princess Yona's arrival disrupted the peace. The moment he met Yona, the blood of Seiryu in him awakened. He realized the girl in front of him might share an unknown bond with him, but he did not want to use his malevolent power anymore. Hakuryu could never understand his behavior, because after seeing Yona, Seiryu must have awakened as well. However, unlike Hakuryu, he did not fight for the king. Seiryu village and Hakuryu village were entirely opposite in this regard. After careful analysis, Yoon concluded that it was actually Hakuryu village that was the exception. Due to the constant wars affecting Seiryu village, the villagers did not worship the dragon god, and to them, Hakuryu might truly seem like an invader. Yet, for some reason, Seiryu saved Yona. The group decided to continue searching for Seiryu, believing that speaking with him directly could clear up their confusion. Hawk stayed behind to keep an eye on the villagers to prevent any mischief from them. Meanwhile, Hakuryu and the others were ambushed because they knew Seiryu's secret, and the villagers did not intend to let them leave. Noticing that Yona was getting closer, Seiryu decided to eliminate these intruders. However, the dragon blood within him kept reminding him that the girl before him was the master he was meant to serve for life. It was Seiryu's pet squirrel that broke the deadlock. Yona's approach made Seiryu's nerves tense again. If Yona was truly an invader, failing to stop her could doom the entire village. Upon learning that Yona had come for the power of Seiryu, he prepared to kill her, seeing anyone who wanted Seiryu's power as an enemy. Yet Seiryu found himself unable to thrust the blade. Yona continued to invite Seiryu to join her as a companion, but Seiryu said he was already cursed, insisting that this power must not be known to outsiders, so he could not accept her request. Yona told Seiryu that when he held her hand, it felt warm, even if he carried a dreadful curse. She did not care. Seiryu stood frozen, torn by his emotions. As Yona reached the cave entrance, the villagers had already surrounded it. To conceal Seiryu's existence, they planned to kill Yona and her group, fearing that if the secret was exposed, it would attract endless invaders. Just as the fight began, the stone mountain suddenly shook due to an earthquake, causing numerous rocks to fall. Once the mountain stabilized, the entrance was already sealed. Hawk frantically dug from the outside while panic started to set in for those trapped within the narrow space, facing the threat of suffocation. Hakuryu also revealed his dragon claws, causing the villagers to look on in horror once again. They blamed everything on Seiryu, living in constant fear of his power's outburst, and dreading that their own children might become the next Seiryu. After realizing they were trapped, Seiryu also approached the blocked entrance. The villagers accidentally knocked off Seiryu's mask. After seeing his eyes, everyone was not petrified. To calm the villagers, Seiryu put his mask back on and started chopping at the rocks with an axe. Using his dragon eyes, he found the thinnest wall leading outside and began to break through it before they ran out of oxygen. Hearing the noise, Hawk also dug from the outside. Together they finally made an opening. Outside, Yona invited Seiryu to join her again, and in her presence, he did not need to keep his eyes shut. Seiryu finally tried to trust others. Since the previous Seiryu's death, he had isolated himself and never opened up to anyone. Before leaving, Seiryu deeply bowed to the villagers, acknowledging the village that had raised generations of Seiryu. After starting the journey with Yona, Hakuryu took on the role of Seiryu's older brother, teaching him various skills of a dragon warrior. Although Seiryu was too introverted to remove his mask and only comfortable calling Yona by name, it was a good start. This is a corrupt city. Soldiers forcefully abduct any girl they fancy right in the street, ignoring her cries for help as bystanders turn a blind eye. Anyone attempting to intervene only invites trouble upon themselves. When a girl was on the verge of despair, Hawk and a green-haired man intervened, fiercely driving the soldiers away and quickly escaping with the girl. However, Hawk was unaware that the green-haired man was Ryokuryu, one of the 4 dragon warriors Yona was searching for. Sensing the proximity of Hakuryu and Yona, Ryokuryu used his dragon leg powers to instantly leave the city. Yona and her companions missed him yet again. Although Hakuryu often sensed Ryokuryu's location, he was never there upon arrival. The following day, they re-entered the city to search for Ryokuryu. Hawk, having beaten the soldiers, chose to split from Yona and the others. By fate or intuition, Ryokuryu and Hawk met again in the city, unaware of each other's identities. Ryokuryu took Hawk to a brothel, hoping to make friends with him. During their conversation, Ryokuryu shared information about the city. The Lord's power was strong, secretly engaging in illegal activities behind the nation's back, but the people were too afraid to speak out, fearing they might be the next victims. While Hawk gathered intelligence, Yona arrived and saw him visiting the brothel. Feeling Hakuryu's approach, Ryokuryu had already fled, not wanting to reveal his identity. Having finally escaped the constraints of his village, he sought his own freedom. Hakuryu was puzzled why Ryokuryu always seemed to avoid them. While searching, Hawk encountered the girl he had previously rescued. She told Hawk that the Lord not only trafficked girls arbitrarily, but also imposed heavy taxes on everyone, forcing them to suffer in silence to survive. Near the port, there were many pirates who never harmed the town's residents. They targeted only the Lord's official ships when raiding. Little did Yona and her companions know, Ryokuryu was one of these pirates. Using his dragon powers, he could leap through the sky, playing a key role in attacking the official ships. After a successful hijack, they would burn all contraband aboard to prevent it from entering the city and harming its people. The pirates were originally residents of the city, victimized by the Lord, leading to the destruction of their homes and families. Under the leadership of an elderly woman captain, they formed this crew. To overthrow the Lord's rule, they needed more strength. Ryokuryu thought of Hawk, a man whose combat skills matched his own. If Hawk joined the pirates, it would greatly strengthen their force. At this time, Yona and her companions were still searching for Ryokuryu. Seiryu was guarding their luggage alone in the mountains. The soldiers' brutality was everywhere in the town, but they could not afford to cause trouble there. Yona had to restrain herself from acting. While scouting ahead, Hawk encountered Ryokuryu again, and both ended up on the wanted list. Ryokuryu seized the opportunity to invite Hawk to join his group for a major operation. However, Hawk had no interest in men. His heart belonged only to Princess Yona. Despite Ryokuryu's persistent efforts, Hawk remained unmoved. Yona soon caught up, drawn by Hakuryu, sensing Ryokuryu's presence. However, Ryokuryu had already hidden on a rooftop. After Hakuryu left, Ryokuryu intended to continue pestering Hawk, but accidentally fell in front of Hakuryu. Without hesitation, Hakuryu picked up Ryokuryu and rushed towards Yona. Hearing that he was to meet the reincarnation of King Hiryu, Ryokuryu resisted, preferring his current free life over serving a king he had never met. He mocked Hakuryu for acting like a puppet, merely following the dragon's ancestral wishes without his own thoughts. This was no longer a dragon's wish but a puppet's tragedy. Ryokuryu, intent on persuading Hawk to join, was unaware that Yona had also arrived. Being so close to Yona, the dragon blood within Ryokuryu awakened. The voice of the dragon god echoed, commanding him to acknowledge Hiryu as his master. After confirming that he was one of the 4 dragon warriors she was seeking, Yona invited Ryokuryu to travel with her. However, Ryokuryu believed that his dependence on and faith in Yona were solely due to the dragon blood within him, not his own desires. He stated he would not serve Yona and wanted his freedom, unwilling to risk his life for King Hiryu like Hakuryu. He would choose whom to protect himself. Yona decided to let Ryokuryu go because she was not commanding him but asking for his help. Now that Ryokuryu had his own pursuits, though regretfully, she chose to release him. Yet, Ryokuryu had not given up on Hawk, as his pirate crew was desperately lacking in combat strength. Yona suggested they meet the pirate captain together. She could not overlook the Lord's tyranny in such a dark city, being a princess of the nation. Upon reaching the pirates' stronghold, the captain decided to test their combat abilities by having his crew attack them. The battle ended in seconds, overwhelmed by the trio's strength, akin to adding 3 warriors of Ryokuryu's caliber. However, the captain needed capable individuals. The weak would hinder them. Hawk, Seiryu, and Hakuryu possessed top-tier combat skills, and Yoon brought vast knowledge. Yona, while not skilled in particular areas, did not want to be sidelined. To assess her usefulness, the captain prepared a dangerous challenge for Yona. Once a pampered princess of the kingdom, Yona is now picking herbs on steep cliffs, a challenge set by the captain without allowing Hakuryu and the others to assist. For the first time, Yona relies on herself in dangerous terrain. Ryokuryu constantly urges her to give up, arguing that there is no need for her to push herself to extremes when they are sufficient for combat. However, Yona detests feeling powerless and fears losing those around her again. Ryokuryu's perception of Yona gradually changes. He was told by the previous Ryokuryu that King Hiryu was an absolute monarch with a deep connection to the dragon warriors. Ryokuryu assumed the reincarnated King Hiryu would be a tyrant ruling with immense power. He never expected the King Hiryu he met to be a seemingly weak woman without any apparent abilities. Despite trembling, Yona continues to move forward and successfully reaches the herbs. Her achievement marks the first time she has relied on her own strength to help her companions. On her return, a strong wind and huge waves knock Yona off the cliff. Ryokuryu, frantic with worry, rushes to help her. Luckily, Yona manages to grab a vine and avoid falling into the sea. Hakuryu and the others arrive at the cliff top. Yona brings back the herbs and tells the captain about Ryokuryu's assistance, but she insists on going back alone to pick the herbs again. The captain laughs heartily upon seeing Yona's determination. She had sent Ryokuryu to monitor Yona's herb picking also as a safeguard, knowing Ryokuryu would never let a girl come to harm. The test of Yona's resolve is complete, and the captain decides to let Yona join them in their plans. Seeing Yona return safely, Hawk finally relaxed his tense nerves. He did not want Yona to take risks, but he knew her stubborn nature. Preventing her would make her resent him forever. Ryokuryu teased Hawk for his doting attitude towards Yona, questioning if they were lovers. However, Hawk stated he only saw Yona as someone important to protect. Ryokuryu saw deeper, noticing the closeness between Hawk and Yona, yet also a maintained distance. He believed Hawk did not truly want to possess Yona, but rather just to be by her side. Ryokuryu's words struck a chord with Hawk. As everyone prepared for the trip, Hawk found Yona alone and saw her hands covered in numerous cuts, which pained him deeply. The once delicate princess was becoming stronger. Hawk applied honey to Yona's hands to soothe her wounds. This might have been the first time Hawk openly expressed his feelings. He had always protected Yona and Suwon like an older brother, often suppressing his own emotions. For some reason, his heart felt unusually restless at that moment. As night fell, the pirates began planning how to overthrow the Lord's rule. The Lord, sensing the pirates' movements, gathered his forces to eliminate the rebellious pirates. On their official ships were girls and children about to be sold abroad. The pirates couldn't attack blindly without risking harm to these captives. The first step was to identify the ship holding the children. Ryokuryu took Yona into town to gather intelligence, and they encountered the true face of the Lord. His presence made the townspeople avoid him, and any girl he fancied would mysteriously disappear that day. Some girls dressed as boys to evade the Lord. Using his experience as a playboy, Ryokuryu easily saw through one girl's disguise. She told them that she and her best friend had heard about a well-paying job and went to apply, but only her pretty friend was kept by the employer. Curious about the job, she sneaked a peek into the room and saw her friend disappear through a trapdoor. Ryokuryu concluded that this place was an entrance to a human trafficking hub. After returning, they agreed on a time for the raid with the captain. Yona suggested an infiltration from the inside. If she could blend in as a hostage and then set off fireworks on the ship, it would signal where the captives were located. As the only young girl present, Yona was the best candidate for infiltration. Hawk and Hakuryu naturally disagreed with Yona taking such a risk, fearing immediate execution if the Lord discovered her. However, they lacked time to search the ships, and a battle could break out at any moment. If delayed too long, the girls could be sold abroad. At this point, there was no better option. To increase the success rate of the operation, the captain decided to send someone to accompany Yona on the mission. This person needed to disguise themselves as a beautiful girl to catch the Lord's eye. Among those present, only Yoon, who had been working in the background and was already quite handsome, fit the bill as the only viable choice. That night, Hawk found Yona again, urging her to abandon the perilous mission. Yona had always believed her country was peaceful and prosperous, just as her father had wished, a land without strife and full of laughter. However, since leaving the palace, she had witnessed countless human miseries, making her question her father's rule and acknowledge her own responsibility as a princess for not understanding her people's plight. Determined to fight on her own this time, Yona's resolve was such that Hawk had to let her go, realizing he could not sway her determination. The next day, Yoon, dressed in disguise, looked as stunning as Yona. Hakuryu also wanted to join them, but his distinctive dragon claw was too conspicuous, and even in disguise, he stood out too much to follow. Despite deciding to go with Yona, Yoon couldn't help trembling with fear. Having been a wanderer from a young age and lived cautiously, his life experiences made him well suited for the mission. He was determined to protect Yona at all costs. Yoon and Yona arrived at the place offering the high-paying job. As expected, the contact person was very pleased with their looks, seeing them as top-quality goods that could fetch a high price. They were eagerly invited into a room, but as soon as the door closed, Yona and Yoon fell into a hidden chamber and were later taken to a ship's cabin filled with countless other girls. The Lord, hearing that two top-quality individuals had been captured, couldn't resist coming to see Yona and Yoon first. Yona's striking red hair and Yoon's handsome features made him feel almost regretful about selling them directly. He considered taking Yona for himself, ruining her purity, as there were plenty of abducted girls already, and the clients wouldn't care about one or two missing. To protect Yona, Yoon offered to serve the Lord himself, though he also looked attractive in women's clothes. However, the Lord disliked anyone interfering with his decisions. In this city, he was like a king. The Lord was unexpectedly intimidated by Yona's gaze because he had visited the royal city before and seen similar red hair on the princess. Considering the similarity in age, He suspected Yona might be the missing princess. Yona, appearing humble, knelt before the Lord, claiming she was just a poor merchant's daughter from the city, lured by the promise of a well-paying job. The Lord then reassured himself, believing that a noble princess would never kneel and beg like her. The girl before him was just a tool to be used at his convenience, but he lost interest in having Yona serve him and left the cabin. The abducted girls told Yona that they would soon be sold abroad and turned into tools for others to make money. That was their impending fate. Yona encouraged them to resist the Lord, reminding them that people were waiting for their return. If they wanted to survive, they should fight to live. Meanwhile, the pirate organization awaited the moment to attack. The dragon warriors and Hawk were incredibly anxious, worried about Yona and Yoon's safety. Ryokuryu, though claiming indifference, stayed vigilant 24/7 at the ship's watchtower, fearing he might miss Yona's signal fireworks. Siryu, using his dragon eye, noticed that the Lord's official ship had set sail. The long-awaited battle was finally at hand. Yona and Yoon were bound at the hands and blindfolded. Fortunately, they had brought a small squirrel that quickly gnawed through their ropes. When the guards came to check on the noise, Yona and Yoon ambushed and knocked them out. Angie, one of the abducted girls, planned to work with Yona to expose the ship's location. As the battle outside commenced, the dragon warriors and Hawk fought the Lord's mercenaries while keeping an eye out for Yona's fireworks. Their primary goal was to rescue the trapped girls before fully engaging in the fight. Yoon deliberately exposed their position to attract the guarding soldiers. However, the ship's violent shaking allowed the enemy to capture Angie as a hostage. Yona and Yoon were immediately at a loss, trapped before reaching the deck and unable to set off the fireworks. At that moment, Yoon revealed his true identity as a man, instantly drawing the guards' attention to himself. He claimed to have set explosives on deck, warning that they would soon detonate unless stopped, and only he knew their location. Not taking any chances, the guards decided to bring him on deck to locate the bomb. Yona knew Yoon was planning to sacrifice himself. Even if he succeeded in setting off the fireworks on deck, he would likely be executed on the spot. During a struggle with the remaining guard, Yona grabbed a bow and arrow that had fallen and followed them. However, Yoon struggled to find a suitable position to launch the fireworks. If the angle was off, Hakuryu and the others might not see them. Moreover, his bluff about the bomb was becoming harder to maintain, and the soldiers decided to kill him to prevent any further issues. At that moment, Yona caught up and aimed the bow at the soldiers. While they were distracted, she rushed over, seized Yoon's fireworks, and launched them. Siryu spotted the fireworks immediately. However, the soldiers quickly captured Yona, suspecting that the fireworks were a signal to the pirates. They decided to eliminate her right away. At a critical moment, Ryokuryu descended from the sky. Seeing Yona covered in bruises, he felt an inexplicable rage, experiencing a murderous intent towards humans for the first time. The enemy noticed Ryokuryu and started to bridge over for support. Fortunately, Siryu arrived just in time, joining Ryokuryu to protect Yona. Hawk and Hakuryu, meanwhile, were suppressing the main force of the enemy, fiercely clearing foes to reach Yona sooner. While they all fought desperately, the Lord remained calm. Even if all his mercenaries were defeated and all the abducted girls were rescued, he believed as long as he lived, he could always take more. By the time Ryokuryu reached the ship's hidden chamber, the Lord had already escaped in a small boat. As long as he was alive, he viewed the battle as his victory, always the ultimate winner. Ryokuryu, using his dragon powers, quickly caught up with the Lord. However, the Lord used a boatman as a shield and shot arrows at Ryokuryu, causing him to fall into the sea. Even a powerful dragon can't fly once it falls into the water. Just as the Lord thought he had the upper hand, he suddenly felt a strong intent to kill targeting him. And it was Princess Yona. For the first time in her life, she took a life to protect her companions, staining her hands with blood. With the Lord's death, the battle finally ended. They returned to the city, and while Hawk and Hakuryu were unscathed, Yona and Yoon were covered in wounds. In a fit of rage, they beat up the mercenaries. Everyone was immersed in the joy of victory, marking a new beginning for the city. Yona, wandering alone in the streets, unexpectedly encountered the last person she ever wanted to see, Su-wan, who had killed her father and taken the throne. For some unknown reason, he had also come to this place. After Su-wan ascended to the throne, he began a journey to reform the tribes of the nation, starting with the Earth Tribe, one of the 5 tribes. The Earth Tribe was a warlike group, but the previous king had always avoided war, leaving General Gyun, the tribe chief, completely demotivated. Especially when seeing Su-wan's frail appearance, Gyun was even more displeased. Although Su-wan was the son of a respected general, he lacked any grand military demeanor. His visit to the Earth Tribe seemed focused only on tea tasting and viewing tea fields, much like the timid approach of the former king, while his tribe faced a developmental crisis. Gun had no interest in entertaining the new king and directly questioned Su-wan if he would, like his predecessor, pursue peace at the risk of the kingdom's security. He declared that he would be the first to rebel if that were the case. Expecting Su-wan to react fiercely, Gun was disappointed to see him still smiling. Deciding to no longer serve Su-wan, Gun was soon informed by his subordinates that Prince Su-wan had decided to initiate a war. Elated, Gun thought he could finally achieve his ambitions, but was disappointed to find out it was only a simulated war game. Although he could not understand why Su-wan took pleasure in this, he was still the king, and Gun was not yet ready to openly confront him. As the competition began, Gun's wife also prepared festive clothes for everyone. Seeing everyone immersed in the joyous atmosphere, Gun grew even angrier and decided to teach Su-wan, whom he considered an incompetent king, a lesson during the match. However, as soon as the competition started, Su-wan hid behind, allowing his soldiers to form a human wall to protect him. Gun had to first deal with the obstructing soldiers. While Gun was engrossed in battle, his own men were being eliminated one after another. Su-wan, pretending to be a harmless rabbit, occasionally showed a fierce gaze. But then he would again be chased around by his soldiers. At that moment, a strong wind blew up a dust storm in the square, completely obscuring visibility. Gun could no longer tell where his men were, but Su-wan's soldiers knew exactly where to stand, in the direction facing the wind, giving them a better view and the advantage to potentially ambush Gun. Su-wan had instructed them to use the wind to their advantage, allowing them to dominate amidst the chaos. Hearing this, Gun realized that Su-wan was far from incompetent. His fleeing was not actual retreat, but a tactic to lure his own men into traps. Therefore, Gun charged directly at Su-wan, only to find that Su-wan's martial skills were also formidable, blocking all his attacks. By then, Gun's men were completely defeated, while Su-wan's soldiers had hardly any losses. If this had been a real battlefield, Gun would have certainly been doomed. But Su-wan's goal was not yet achieved, so he decided to challenge Gun to a one-on-one duel. For Gun, this was no longer just a game, but a test to see if this king was truly worthy of his loyalty. Although Gun appeared to have won the duel, he knew Su-wan had held back on the final strike. The next day, Gun's wife excitedly informed him that countless caravans planned to buy her cultivated tea leaves, but her tea fields were too small to meet market demand. Su-wan suggested gradually expanding the cultivation area and selling the tea as a premium specialty product, arguing that scarcity would increase its value. This would attract more people, boosting other industries in the area. Meanwhile, Gun's men reported that the beautiful stones mined from the tribe's mines were being bought in large numbers. Although worthless, these stones had become popular because Gun wore them during the battle, turning them into symbols of courage due to his valorous image, which gathered many fans. Gun praised his wife for her contributions to the tribe's development, which he was unaware of. However, his wife clarified that she hadn't done much except serve tea to guests Su-wan introduced during the competition. While she had chosen the clothes for the competition, the idea to adorn them with the beautiful stones was Su-wan's. Hearing this, Gun hurriedly sought Prince Su-wan, only to find he had already left the Earth Tribe. Gun realized the extent of his own influence over the tribe, something he was previously unaware of, and also understood Su-wan's intentions. The seemingly clueless king had managed to accomplish what he could not, proving more formidable than Su-wan's father. Gun finally began to look forward to Su-wan's reign with anticipation. After resolving issues with the Earth Tribe, Su-wan hurried to the next city. He had heard that the local lord was committing crimes, trafficking girls through dark forces, and engaging in shady dealings with foreigners. However, he never expected that upon his arrival, all these problems had already been thoroughly addressed by Yona and others. He also encountered Yona again, the person he once cared for. Su-wan could hardly believe his eyes, and Yona trembled, unsure how to confront the man who killed her father. As Su-wan's guards caught up, fearing exposure, Yona thought about fleeing, but was suddenly pulled into Su-wan's embrace. If the guards discovered Yona was alive, they would not let her go. Seeing Su-wan holding a woman in the street, the guards felt helpless and urged him to return to investigate the lord's case. Yona noticed the dagger at Su-wan's waist, and briefly contemplated assassinating him. However, Su-wan seemed to sense her intentions and held her hand. After distracting his guards, Su-wan left the scene. The boy possessed the ability to never age or die, but he was unaware that this power was the cruelest curse. As he watched his close friends go through the natural cycles of birth, aging, sickness, and death while he remained as young as ever, never falling ill and healing instantly from injuries, he realized the horror of immortality. However, fate did not release him from its grasp. After years of wandering, Zeno met a girl suffering from a contagious disease. The two fell in love and married, but her health weakened day by day. Zeno prayed countless times to the dragon god who had given him his powers, hoping to extend his wife's life, but his prayers were ignored, and she died. Zeno guarded his wife's body for decades before burying her bones and resuming his nomadic life. During this time, he also visited the descendants of the other three dragon warriors. Due to their strange powers, Each lived a life more tragic than the last. He couldn't understand why the dragon warrior's lineage continued even after King Hiryu had died, until one day, when a bright red star appeared, signaling to him that King Hiryu might have been reincarnated. He silently waited for the reunion of his brothers and King Hiryu. When Yona found the other dragon warriors, Uryu also came to her side. However, Yona did not recognize the boy before her as Uryu, but rather mistook him for a wandering beggar, attracted by the delicious food they were preparing. The three dragon warriors watched Uryu eat and could hardly believe he was their blood brother, as he was the first to approach Yona proactively. The ease with which the four dragon warriors gathered made it seem surreal to them. Uryu, looking at Yona, did not awaken the dragon's blood like the other warriors because he was the original Uryu, whose loyalty was to King Hiryu alone. To him, Yona was just a cute little sister with King Hiryu's bloodline. Yona was unsure how to persuade Uryu to join them as a companion, but Uryu agreed immediately. He had no specific purpose or desires, and thought traveling with Yona and the others would be quite enjoyable, especially since he was very satisfied with their meals. This acceptance was even quicker than Hakuryu's. Uryu greeted everyone warmly and mentioned that he had no special abilities, just a very sturdy body. Since the end of the mythological era, this was the first reunion of the four dragon warriors in thousands of years. Hakuryu cried tears of joy, while Uryu simply smiled, having always quietly watched over them. The group resumed their journey and happened upon a hot spring inn where they decided to rest. While bathing, Ryokuryu noticed the huge claw mark on Hakuryu's back, realizing that Hakuryu, like him, had been harmed by the previous dragon. Hakuryu had also seized an opportunity to escape from his village. Hakuryu shared with Ryokuryu that his predecessor, who was also his father, had inflicted the claw mark at his birth. Afterwards, the village chief imprisoned the father, forbidding him from any private contact with children. Hakuryu's visits to his father were always supervised by villagers. Over time, his father became depressed as he lost his dragon powers. Hakuryu secretly visited his father in confinement, finding that his father's dragon hand had completely vanished, losing all dragon powers, which were then inherited by the new Hakuryu. In the evening, to celebrate the gathering of the four dragon warriors, and to welcome Uryu, they held a rare drinking party. However, Hakuryu was quickly drunk after just one drink. Ryokuryu attempted to remove Seiryu's mask while he was drunk, but was frightened by the dragon's eye. Uryu also got thoroughly drunk, calling out for King Hiryu in his sleep. Having lived for thousands of years under the curse of immortality, he longed to see the king again. Yona found the four dragon warriors, completing the first step assigned by the priest. After a long journey, the group returned to the priest's secluded residence. The priest, who lacked self-care skills, had nearly starved to death, earning a scolding from Yoon. According to divine messages the priest heard, the birth of the king, in addition to having the four dragon warriors, also involved a sword and shield to protect the king. If Yona is said to be the king, then where should they look for the sword and shield? The priest said the appearance of the sword and shield would take time, but eventually everything would become clear. Uryu suddenly became serious, and asked Yona what she planned to do with the dragon warriors. She and Hawk had been expelled from the palace and needed strength to protect themselves, having now achieved their goal. The next steps were either to continue fleeing to avoid pursuit or to dethrone Suwon. Soon after, Uryu returned to his carefree demeanor. He wasn't dictating Yona's decisions, but reminding her to think carefully about her future path. He and the other dragons would continue to follow her. The other three dragon warriors were shocked by Uryu's forthrightness, as the kingdom's affairs were always a painful subject for Yona, and they dared not mention it lightly. Whenever asked about the new king, Hawk also avoided the topic. At night, Yona sought out the priest again and shared her experiences. She realized that there must still be countless people in the kingdom suffering greatly. She wanted to fulfill her duties as a princess. Remembering that Suwon had once spoken similar words, she began to understand his intentions. The priest told Yona that even when King Hiryu was hated and betrayed by humans, he still loved them and rejected the dragon god's proposal to destroy humanity. Yona practiced swordsmanship alone in the forest at night, with Hawk silently accompanying her. Hawk wanted everyone to see Yona's impressive transformation, from a spoiled, pampered princess to a determined woman who had cut her hair and taken up arms to fight the darkness within her people. A new journey was about to begin. The story of Yona and the four dragon warriors will continue. Who exactly are the sword and shield mentioned by the priest? Why did Suwon kill the king and seize power? Will Yona eventually attack Hiryu Castle to reclaim her throne and avenge her father? What trials and sufferings lie ahead for Uryu with his immortal body? Will he ever meet his King Hiryu again?